Is it on now?
Okay.
It's not on now. No.
It's on. I can hear him here.
So we were able to operate on our reserves for the most of the pandemic, and then the federal government provided some assistance to airports through a program called the RADI Fund. So that was a one-time financial contribution for operating funds, and that helped sustain us throughout the term of our loss of service with Air Canada. Now, our airport was one of the hardest hit in all of North America, and certainly one of the hardest hit in Canada. We were without service for over a year and a half. Most airports, as an example in New Brunswick, were without service for a couple of weeks during the pandemic. So the level of impact that we were hit with was significant. On the good side, our cost of operation is much less than other airports. So what it takes for us to be viable, and right now we're facing some difficulties, what it takes for us to be back operating at a sustainable level are not very huge amounts. We need a return to more normal service like what we had in the past with Air Canada. Right now we're operating with a very limited schedule, and I'll be running through very quickly with some slides here. This is the present schedule that we have with Air Canada for air service at the Bathurst Regional Airport. Pre-pandemic, we were 2 flights a day, morning and evening. And at our peak, right before we had started construction, when we did our renovation for our new terminal and runway expansion, we were up to 3 flights a day through the summer. So we had a slight downturn while we were doing construction, which was to be expected. We were working with Air Canada's partnership through that. We operated all winter long with this schedule of service for 4 days a week, and kept our runway open and our staff coming in to ensure that the runway was clear and open for the air ambulance service on the days of the week when we had no passenger air service. For an airport, passenger air service represents about 95% of our revenues. So it's significant. Back in the days when we had daily service, multiple flights per day, we could service the air ambulance, and it wasn't prohibitive for us because we already had our staff on site servicing the passenger flight. When you look at the schedule here, you'll notice April, May, June, the top 3 indicate arrivals from Montreal. That's our primary destination. And then the same April, May, June for going from Bathurst back to Montreal. You'll notice that each month there are different times of the day. And what that does is it drives away our customers. When your schedule changes frequently, you're not operating to what your passengers need. When you don't have daily service at a minimum, you're not providing what passengers and your clients in your region need. Right now, if you're, as an example, a rotational worker trying to get back here to spend time with your family, you can only come in 1 of 4 days out of the week. So that means you're losing time with your family. Or you can't get back to the job site for the days when you're supposed to be scheduled to work. That's not acceptable. You can't operate that way. And right now, same for the business community and the traveling public. When you have an event you need to get to, somebody needs family support, you need to be there, you can't choose the day of the week that you're going to be there. You have to be able to go, and you have to be able to get back in a timely fashion. Right now, the schedule we're able to offer, it's not meeting the needs of the people in our region. We're aware of that. It's not something that is by choice that's happening. This is due to a pilot shortage nationwide right now. And what's happening, the air carriers having to focus on the larger centers where they're moving more population at once, which makes business sense, but they're also trying to avoid being in the media for cancellations and for delays. There's significant fines now for whenever there's cancellations and delays for an air carrier, and it can be over $1,000 per passenger for a 9-hour delay. So when you imagine 100 people on an airplane or 200 people, that's big money fast. So they're focusing where they have to at the larger centers, but it's hurting the smaller and the regional airports. So airports like ours, Sydney, Nova Scotia, there's several in Ontario and all across Canada and all in northern Canada. We're all in the same situation, and some are a little worse off than us right now, and some are about to be a little worse off. Air Canada has been an excellent long-term partner. We're talking with other air carriers, but they're also facing pilot shortage issues. So it's not a simple problem of just bringing another air carrier. Every air carrier is facing this problem right now. In the past, how were we operating? Well, Jazz here represents the Air Canada flights. Medevac represents our air ambulance. Those are the primary activities at the airport. That's not counting the support for forest fire protection, mineral exploration, the Coast Guard, the military. We have all different things that comes through our airport, plus general aviation. But these are the ones that the airport is geared towards, and especially for Jazz with passenger service, that's the main source of revenue, and fuel sales. In 2019, you can see we had well over 1,000 flights. What this represented was significant revenue for us at the time. We were generating a surplus, which was reinvested in the airport. We're a not-for-profit board, so any profit that we make is reinvested back into the infrastructure to serve the public. Throughout the pandemic, you can see that medevac levels stayed almost the same because we don't have access to a critical cardiac center here in northern New Brunswick. We need to be able to reach that in St. John, or to get to the IWK in Halifax, or for Shriners flights going to Montreal. Here's the yearly revenues that we make in total for air ambulance services. So it's about $70 per flight when the air ambulance comes in, for a total of about $17,000 per year in revenue. What it costs us to operate the airport for one day is $5,500. So that's our average cost. So you can imagine in the average 3 days, it's more than what we generate in a year of service for air ambulance. Right now, we're operating 3 days of the week solely to support air ambulance. Here's our passenger volumes. And there's a couple of things in this slide to note. This is the key slide to indicate what happened during the pandemic, the complete loss of service in 2020 through 2021, and a slight return in 2021, 2022 to where we are in 2022, 23 at present, with about 16,000 passengers. In the past, we averaged around 42, 43,000. We're always between 40 and 50,000 passengers. That same amount of people is traveling right now from our region. We have the same amount of customers. We just conducted a leakage study. So we see where people are traveling from, where they're going to, what airports they're using, and what airlines they're using. All these people right now, the majority of them are still using Air Canada. They're flying out of different airports because they can't have service on the days and the times that they need right now, even though our site is fully staffed, ready to go, able to handle, we can handle 10 flights a day. The peaks in 2013 up to the end of 2016 represent when we were having our 3 flights a day. At that point, we had to stop advertising because we were getting complaints. Nobody could buy a ticket because the aircraft were always full. So they added the additional flights. That was one way that they tried to resolve that. That additional flight was full. So our terminal at that time was very small. Our runway needed an extension, so we did that. And it took from 2016 and was completed in 2019. So that represents the downturn where we would have to close the runway at times and we had to turn back flights. So there was a slight downturn. We anticipated that. 2019, we also had the impacts, you may remember in the media, the 737 MAX. That was a huge downturn right before COVID in the air industry. There was thousands of passenger seats that were lost as a result of that, and the air carriers had to reassign their pilots. So what happened there again was the smaller regional airports lost a level of service. So that impacted our 2019 numbers. 2019, 2020 is when we anticipated an increase in our service. We were expecting to go to 150% of what we were in the past. So we were expecting to welcome at least another 25,000 passengers that year, and we had got COVID-19 instead, and everything shut down. So I started about a month before the pandemic hit, and I've been learning very quickly since then, and still challenges to date here. What these challenges look like is 32% of our northern New Brunswick catchment represented on here, the largest geographical segment of our province. It represents a significant population for our province, a significant portion of it. Right now, they only have very limited access to air service. During the pandemic, we were essentially cut off from the rest of the world. And we're 2 or 3 months away from having this happen again without having to drive for 2, 3+ hours during snowstorms, etc., during the winter in order to access air service. What this also means is all our industry and all the industry projects that are coming up and tourism would also be impacted if we were to shut down. 70% of our potential clients right now, so we're going from 16,000, we're talking between 40 and 50,000. They're still traveling, but they're doing it out of other centers, and they're driving for hours to do it. They're incurring additional hotel costs, spending more days away, because it's the only way that they're able to move. Our financial situation at present, we have roughly 26,000 left in our bank right now. We have 120,000 showing there in the line of credit. It's actually down to 60,000 now. We just used a large amount of that paying some of our current payables. And our capital reserve was 350,000 at the start of this year, and the board just made a motion to transfer 150,000 to leave us at 202,000 in our capital reserve for roughly 350,000 in operating. So this slide was prepared a couple weeks back. It's a little worse than that at present because our operating costs, it's an average of 181,000 a month. We're earning about 75,000 a month with the present flight levels. So it's not sustainable. We operated like that all through the winter in anticipation of returning to at least a daily service with Air Canada this spring. But the measures they're taking to solve the pilot issue aren't enough as of yet. They're not to the point yet to provide a full daily service at our site. We anticipate that's going to take another 12 to 18 months, which is significant for us. We can operate right now with this burn rate of $100,000 a month until the end of May, partway into the month of June. We currently have payables of over $100,000 that we've been paying. We don't want to burn any of our local suppliers. We have a current debt load of over $2 million. That's covering the expansion, our terminal mortgage. So obtaining loans from the bank, it's not a possibility for us right now at the level of debt that we're carrying. Our main option right now is to have government support, and that's municipal, provincial, and federal. And in order to do that, we need all partners, and we need different types of support from each in order to have a system where, with everybody contributing, we can surpass this deficit problem right now with the pilot shortage. Here's what our figures look like. In 2019, when COVID hit, we had just finished paying off the last of our expansions. That represents the slight deficit at the bottom here at $577,000. That's the final expansion costs were paid in that year. That's also when we had our start, the downturn from the MAX, 737 MAX, and COVID. But you'll notice our revenues and our expenses here. Our average revenues for the 10 years before that were $2.6 million. The downturn started there. We anticipated a slight deficit this year, which we were going to cover from our reserve, and that came out from before the 1.2 million. So we went from expenses of around $3 million a year. We cut our expenses for the following year down to $1 million. That was without air service. We operated on our reserve for that time to ensure that we maintained air ambulance. The RADI fund came in from the federal government, which carried us through until the restart of service with Air Canada. We held on to $350,000 in our reserve throughout all of that against against a new wave of COVID that we anticipated might have come through last fall. Thankfully, that didn't materialize. But what happened was the level of service that was demanded of the airlines had significantly increased post-pandemic from what it was before. The number of seats available decreased, and the number of pilots available decreased significantly because the airlines during the pandemic offered early retirements. A number of baby boomers left the sector altogether, so we always knew that there was going to be an impact when the baby boomers were going to be leaving the workforce. COVID sped that up. So there's less experienced pilots in the pool, and the time it takes to train a pilot, it's not the same as you stop driving your car today, you can get in tomorrow and drive because you have a license. To operate as a captain, you have to have so many hours operating in the aircraft in the second seat, and that's why they're focusing out west right now. WestJet's pulled out of our region, same thing. They're flying captains with 25, 30 years experience in the co-pilot seat right now, just so they can certify in order to be able to fly again as a pilot. So until that part's resolved, the sector is going to be still in a difficult situation, especially for the smaller and regional airports. What it means for us in the end is we need a stopgap bridge loan. We're dealing with the federal government and the provincial governments. We presented at Parliament in Ottawa. We've talked to all different levels of government, and our main means to access to funding right now, we had meetings again today with RDC and with the ministers responsible. If we can secure a contribution from local municipal government in our region, that will help us secure the provincial funding and in turn the federal funding. I'm here tonight with an ask. We're trying to raise $100,000 collectively in all of our region from here into the Acadian Peninsula to show that the local government supports the airport as a partner as we support the local industry here in the tourism sector. We presented to the Regional Service Commission. We're going to be presenting to the Regional Service Commission for the Acadian Peninsula shortly. Some of the other municipalities we'll be presenting to later this week and in the following week. They've already indicated that they're willing to make a contribution. We're trying to raise this $100,000 over a 2-year period. What we would ask is if you would consider a $10,000 contribution towards that over a 2-year period. This would significantly help us showing that local government has skin in the game when we're dealing with the province and with the federal government, and assist us in securing funding through them for the remainder that we require in order to continue our operations. At present, we've just secured a conditional loan from CBDC for $200,000. That's conditional upon us receiving provincial and federal government monies. So if council could consider this request and support us in this, it would help us to obtain the bridge financing that we need, and it'd be funding that we're going to be repaying in the future in order to get past this unprecedented disruption in the air sector. I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
So I have questions. Oh, sorry. What kind of equipment is available at the Bathurst Airport right now to enable flights to land during snowstorms and fog?
Okay. Right now, we operate a full GPS approach. What happens though is that we still have an effective ceiling of 250 feet. So that's for pilots coming in. That's when they make the call. It's the pilot themselves that decides if they're going to land or not, or if they're going to divert or return to Montreal. So that's always at their discretion. We're looking for additional infrastructure right now at present, but again, all of our capital reserve we've used for operating funds to continue our operation through the pandemic. For snowstorms, we can handle any type of snow event. De-icing capability, we have full capability. We purchased all the equipment that Air Canada operated at our site whenever they shuttered their service back at the start of the pandemic. So that was additional cost we had to incur.
So it's my understanding that Charlot has the equipment available to be able to land in fog. Is that, do you know if that's correct?
I'm not 100% certain what they have that would be different from us at the present time, but we're in talks with Charlot and looking to partner with them. It would be very nice to have them as a secondary site, but those are discussions that we're having at present.
Yes, because I think that that has been an ongoing issue. Like, we've had residents here die simply because the plane couldn't land. So we've had residents die in an ambulance waiting at the airport because the plane couldn't land. So it's great when the Meta plane can land, but we're relying on something that isn't always available due to the fact that we don't have the proper equipment to allow it to be able to land.
We're actually in the same conditions though. Like, any time when a pilot deems it unsafe to land, it's their call to do that. And it's the same thing that happens Moncton, Fredericton, St. John. Just the volumes that we have right now, at 4 flights a day, when we have 1 cancellation in a day, that's 100% cancellation rate. At Moncton, when they have 15 flights a day, 1 cancellation represents a 7% cancellation. How it gets spun in the media sometimes makes it very difficult for us.
Well, the incident that I'm talking about that I know firsthand about happened in 2010. Okay. So in my opinion, there's been plenty of opportunity and plenty of time from 2010 to 2020 to rectify some of that. And to my knowledge and from what you're saying, it has not yet been done. So I think that's a little bit disappointing considering that there's been renovations and money put into that facility. And I think that that should have been something that would have been an important thing to put ahead of maybe some other things. My other question was, are there any flights, or is it possible for flights that are leaving Halifax to stop and pick up people in Bathurst? And if that's not happening, why?
That's something that we've sought both with our present air carrier and with alternate air carriers. But again, after the pandemic, the air carriers are very risk averse in taking on new markets. And right now they're dealing with a pilot shortage issue, same as all the large carriers. Actually, the smaller and regional carriers have it a little harder. What's happening is they're training up the pilots, and then the larger carriers are snatching them away. So Air Canada and WestJet, as an example, are recovering a bit faster than some of the air carriers in our market right now that would be able to do that. PAL would be the ideal example in the Maritimes, in the Atlantic Canada, that would be able to do a service like that. And we're continuing discussions with them all the time. That's something that we would love to offer. Right before the pandemic hit, we were dealing with Air Canada on a potential Toronto flight, and that fell to the wayside with the pandemic as well. So it's offerings we'd like to have. We'd also like to have an Ottawa routing. That would be very good for our region as well. That's one of the highest demands. So we always get asked for Halifax, Toronto, and Ottawa, and those are things that we're working on for the future as well.
So, sorry, I'm having a hard time to hear you and maybe understand what you're saying. So the airlines themselves are refusing? They don't want to do that? They don't want to make that stop? Like, I'm just comparing it to, like, there's been times when I've flown out west where the plane would stop, say, in Hamilton, and others would get on, and then it would continue on. I've seen it actually, go as far as Calgary and then turn around and go back to Regina. Like, so I'm just wondering, is it the airline that's refusing to do that?
Yes, because it means additional landing and terminal fees for them. So the ideal for an airline is a direct route. That's what they want to do, and within their fuel range. So whenever they have to make extra stops, it adds time on the trip, which is a disincentive, and their competition, if they're offering a direct route, their competition has a major edge on them for that.
Yeah.
It's something that we're looking at and we're dealing with them on. They do it on occasion for certain flights, but that's not the preferred mode to operate. So we are trying to get a scheduled flight, though, to connect Bathurst and Halifax for the future. That would be ideal for us.
So you only have one flight carrier, Air Canada,
At present,
that
yes.
flies in there? That's it? WestJet and all the others pulled away?
WestJet has pulled out of Atlantic Canada almost altogether. They have a remaining flight in Moncton, and you're going to see some service with them through that. But for the most part, they've pulled out of most of Atlantic Canada. They're focusing all out west right now, and it's to give their pilots the maximum hours, as well as to focus their client base where there's a larger customer base. Atlantic Canada right now is lagging behind the rest of Canada by over 10-15% in recovery because of that.
So the $10,000 that you were referring to, you said that was split over a 2-year period?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We realize it's a difficult time to come and ask when the budget is already in place. And we're not looking for an ongoing financing of the airport. That's not what we're looking for. It's a stopgap measure. And with this, it allows us to leverage for obtaining the other levels of financing that we need from the other sectors of government. It's not the nature of the airport to be asking for operational funding. It's the first time we've ever done it. The airport's been operating for over 50 years. It's always been sustainable. It's always been a not-for-profit board. So everything's always invested back into the community and for the airport infrastructure. And that's what we want to return to. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night. I'll forward you that contact by email too following the meeting. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Business of council. Councillor Burke, you're up, I believe.
Okay, just prior to reading the report from MB Power, I'm going to make the statement, and and council can choose whatever they wish to do, but I am going to make it public knowledge that any meeting, any issues that I have in the future will be a public report made so that the public and council are aware of what transpired and what I did at that meeting and what was said, so that the information is out there in the public. I don't want to say the rest, but that will be their choice. But I will be making reports on every meeting I have, which will be read either at the committee of the whole or at the public meetings. So with that said, the first one I wish to read is concerning the Community Liaison Committee for Beldoon and Dalhousie. This message is to update and inform the citizens of Beldoon of what is planned and what is happening with NB Power here in Beldoon. The committee is chaired by Robert Scott, Director, General Relations and Stakeholders Engagement, and Bernard Roy, Beldoon Station Manager. The committee meets on a regular quarterly basis, and the information contained in this report was compiled from the meeting of March 21, 2023. The Beldoon Power Plant operated well throughout the winter, and no safety incidents were reported. Various studies are underway to determine the best options for the generating station in Beldoon to continue operating past 2030. The station will not be operating this summer. There is a 10-week planned maintenance program that will begin on April 21st, with the main focus on inspection and maintenance of the turbines. Repairs and the inspections will also be carried out in the reheater, superheater section. NB Power has planned a major investment for improvements at the Beldoon generating station. These investments will see improved roofing on the Beldoon boiler house and the auxiliary building roof. There is a Beldoon damper building repair program, and the exciter in Beldoon will be replaced. Some other planned and budget items to be addressed in Beldoon include the auxiliary boiler replacement, the MCC replacement, and the stacking tubes repaired. NB Power is trying to determine the best practice for bird deterrent at the port. They will be trying various methods that are environmentally friendly to both the birds and the environment. The committee would like to pass on the following corporate information so that the public is informed directly. The Council of the Village of Beldoon wish to congratulate Lori Clark on her recent appointment as President and Chief Executive Officer of NB Power. Mrs. Clark has over 32 years of service and was the interim CEO prior to this appointment. NB Power is actively involved in house shows across the province where they demonstrate energy-efficient products for your home. There will be a show in Beresford on April 28th to April 30th. The public is invited to attend these informative shows. The Energy Utility Board has asked NB Power to reduce their rate increase. This will be in place for April 1st. NB Power is asking users to look closely at their monthly invoice because they have introduced a rate rider that is on the invoice. This will represent a rebate on your invoice. For further information on this, please contact NB Power on this program. In closing, Beldoon is very pleased with the information this committee supplies for our community. Mr. Scott and Mr. Roy have been very positive and upfront with the future and the development of our generating station. NB Power continues to make major investments in this generating station, and these investments are an example of the continued importance of this station. As a committee representative, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the dedicated members of NB Power who have kept Beldoon informed and in contact with all major issues concerning our community. That's my report on the NB Power meeting.
Any questions or comments?
Okay, the second item that I wish to talk about has to do with expenses, and those are twofold. The first comment I wish to make, item one, has to do with our fire department. The biggest liability we have is in the fire department. And one of the biggest practices that should be out there is that a firefighter should be working to obtain their level 1 firefighting certificate. At the moment, I believe we have something like 28 members on our fire department, and 6 or 7 have level 1. Those 6 or 7 are all the chiefs and the captains and the deputy chiefs. So with that said, we have limited resources at the firefighting level. What I'm recommending is that the firefighters require a tremendous amount of hours to achieve their level 1. I'm not right up to scratch on how much time it takes, but I have heard that it takes 200 hours to achieve your level 1. With that said, they were offering a course here in Beldoon here just a few weeks ago. I believe we had 5 firefighters who were signed up for that course here in Beldoon. Only 3 showed. That course went from 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday till 5 o'clock at night, and then repeated again on Sunday. So we have firefighters that were there basically taking 16 hours of training, and that's only the beginning of their level 1. The motivation is just not there for them to be there. That is why they don't want to go. So my recommendation to council would be this. I would like to see the firefighters paid $100 a day for attending to motivate them to take the course to reach their level 1. If they do a half day, it would be $50. But with that said, it comes down to that, the question could be, well, where's the money going to come from? For me, I'm going to answer it just like this. We've got budgeted $265,000 to pave Rorty Road. Let's make it $260,000 and take $5,000 out of that budget to turn around and look after our firefighters. I believe the liability that lies with our firefighters is we need to show them the respect they have earned by being on the fire department, and we need to show them that we are here to support their efforts to be trained to a level where we can be proud of every single firefighter that's on our department. The other side to all that is that, when we look at the liabilities, we've been extremely fortunate that we have not had issues at this moment in time. But I do know that there was an incident many years ago where Beldoon was sued, and we paid that lawsuit. So the question becomes, whatever reason it was, I'm not interested in those details. I'm just saying that, for me, I am very, very strong in having our firefighters have the support they need to get the training they need, and we need to motivate them. The recommendation I wish to make on how that will be paid is that I don't think it should come out of the firefighters' budget. I believe that it should come out of council's budget. So with that said, a form can be developed that a firefighter would fill out. He would have the fire chief sign off on that form and submit that to our CAO, who would authorize the payment. Simple as that. I don't want to make this a whole thing about paperwork and bogged down. I want to make this so that our firefighters have the opportunity to get the training they need, and Beldoon has the expertise that we require, or that is let's say above the standard of other departments. And that's basically where I'm at on that. So at the public meeting in 2 weeks' time, I will have a motion on the table that will say just that. So, if there are any questions or any comments or any advice that you wish to give, that's fine. I'm open to any ideas you have.
Council?
I'm wondering, don't they already get paid for their training? Nicole, do they? And what do they get paid?
It's in their policy for regular training. I believe it's $30 for one training or whatever. I don't know about the other stuff. Yeah, I think so, yeah. Yeah, it is, yeah.
So are you suggesting that it would be an additional 100 on top of the 30, or
No,
30 in total?
No,
Or 100 in
I'm
total?
there is a big difference between going to training, I believe it's on Wednesday night. They go on a Wednesday night and they have a meeting one week and they have a training the next. And at the end of the day, they're paid $30 to attend those meetings and those trainings. I don't want to be into that. I want to leave that alone, and I don't want to touch that. I don't want to get involved in that. What I'm suggesting is that when a firefighter is involved and registered and taking the training at level 1, that he will be paid $100 a day to take that, because he's not going to get his level 1 in a day. It's going to take many, many sessions. So, and they can fail when they go there. They even need to take a test at the end of this. So with that said, I believe they need to be motivated to take it. If they're not motivated to go, why would they go? Why would a firefighter want to better himself, you know, and turn around and go to all these hourly sessions that are 8 hours long and do it for, you know, let's say 10 times you've got to go, because, in fact, I don't know if 10 times would cover it. But with that said, at the end of the day, they need their hours, and they need to be motivated to be there, and they need to be motivated to take the course. So what I'm suggesting is, as I just said, if you are registered in a level 1 firefighting course and you are at the course, then you should be paid, as I mentioned, $100 for the day if it's 8 hours, and $50 if it's a half day. That's it. I'm not suggesting that they get the $30 and the $150 or the $100. I'm suggesting that they get $100 a day for going to the course. Done.
So this,
Anyone else?
oh, sorry. So this level 1 firefighter training is not anything, has nothing to do with the one that they do on Wednesday evenings.
No,
This is altogether different,
completely different, completely different.
and the training then would be over several weekends, I'm assuming, if it's 200 hours,
It's
right?
probably over several, it might even be several months and years, you know, depending on when they can get the trainers to present the courses and things of that nature. So that's why I'm saying, for me, I believe they need to be motivated to be able to continue going on the course. That I don't suspect that they're going to have a course every weekend. It's probably going to come down to every couple of months there's going to be an extended course, and they're going to go on these courses, and you know. So, I mean, how does a firefighter? And I don't imagine they're all here in Beldoon. This last course just happened to be in Beldoon. I think you're going to see that there's going to be some in Bathurst, and there'll be some in Caraquet, and you know, that type of thing. So Miramichi. So at the end of the day, they need to be motivated to attend these courses.
I'd just like to make a suggestion, since we're in the process of doing this whole EMO committee. Maybe that's something we could kind of like consider while we're doing that, and not rush into it, and see what other municipalities are doing. Or like we've had a fire department here for many years, and somebody's been motivated to take it because there's people who have taken it. You know, and if that is something that the chief or the EMO, you know, Scott Poupard, or they think that that is something that would be helpful in retaining our firefighters, then I think it's something we could consider. On that note, tell your son Ryan congrats for joining the fire department.
Make no mistake, there will be a motion on the public meeting in 2 weeks' time on just this. Okay?
All right. Second point, Councilor Burke?
That's it.
Have an additional point that you wish to discuss?
Not on that issue. I have the second part of the expense that I wish to look at is that I had mentioned here a few weeks ago that I had attended a course in our meeting of the most beautiful bays in the world, and I did that on a Saturday night from 6 till 10 o'clock. And I submitted my expense, and council, in their wisdoms, shut that down. Well, I want clarification, and I want to make the recommendation again that council attends meetings that they are not paid for, and I'm here to say that that is not right. At the end of the day, when we look at a meeting that, for example, I'll use myself as an example, when I attend a meeting with NB Power or even the Port of Beldoon, I do so within the village limits, and I do so during the day. With that said, that is not a meeting that I believe I should be paid for. The meeting I believe I should be paid for are the ones where you represent the village of Beldoon in a professional business manner, and you have been assigned to that committee or whatever. My point to all this is that we do have a couple of councillors who are being paid for meetings that they attend, and we are not. So I believe that all council should be treated equally, and it comes down to that, when I submitted that expense, I believed it was a legitimate business expense, and it represented the village of Beldoon as professionally as I could. I'm not suggesting for a minute that the village of Beldoon should give its councillors a raise, but I can say that I'm pretty sure at this moment in time that Beldoon is probably one of the lowest paid councils in all of New Brunswick now. With that said, I don't believe that, committee expense should be the difference, but I do believe that even other councils, that when they attend meetings, they are paid there for being there. So with that said, again, I'm going to bring my expense back to the table, and I'm going to ask council that I should be paid, because at the end of the day, I do not believe for a minute that one councillor should be paid or two councillors should be paid for meetings that they attend, and the rest of council should not. I am not opposed to being paid, but I am opposed to some are being paid and some are not. So with that said, I am going to make the recommendation again that the way that council should be paid on meetings of business and professional meetings is that your expense sheet should be submitted to the CAO, who in turn would sign off on that expense, because to bring it to the table every single time you have an expense may be more time consuming than anything else. But if the CAO is signing off on our expense, then it should be paid. So with that said, again, I will be bringing it to the table at the public meeting in 2 weeks' time.
Council?
I have something to say on that. I think that we should be sitting down and deciding on what of these committees or meetings or so on that we should be paid for and the one that we're not. I do agree with Ron that there's certain areas that we go in the evening or the afternoon or so on, and we're going on our own dollar. Well, we get our mileage, but we should sit down and decide what are the areas and where we would be paid for it, so that when we go to these things, we know what it is. Like, do we get paid for UMNB meetings in the evening that we attended last week? Do we get paid on something that we're going to represent our village for the port? Or they sometimes have sessions at Danny's, and then they're asking for a village rep to go in. So those are things I think we need to sit down and decide what would be and what wouldn't be.
Anyone else?
I'd like to know who's getting paid for going to all these meetings, because I'm not.
Yeah, you did.
Which one?
Did you not go to training for the CSRs and when you were down there 2 days? You got paid.
That was paid by them, not the Village of Beldoon.
Who do you think pays them?
Oh,
the
for
Village of
love God.
Beldoon.
Well, if the Beautiful Bay Committee wants to pay you for going there, that's perfectly within their means. But we didn't even give them a donation. So why you thought that it was your place to go up there and represent the village, you chose to do that. It's in the policy how many kilometers outside of the village you get paid for and what you don't get paid for. So you knew before you left that you weren't getting paid. And if you didn't want to go because you weren't getting paid, you shouldn't have went.
Okay, what I would say, council, is I know that we have some bylaws and policies that are going to be looked at down the road. The remuneration policy is, it's a bylaw, so that's something that we can look at. As Councillor Carmichael suggested, it's not uncommon for councils to take a look at the remuneration bylaw occasionally. Last council, we looked at it. Council before, I believe, looked at it. It's one of those things that's fluid and never changing, so it's not uncommon for councils to sit down with this particular bylaw and to see what needs to work at this particular time. And I think that's probably something that's coming up sooner rather than later. There's always going to be things that are in the remuneration bylaw that you're never going to be able to cover or never be able to expect. But taking a look at it one more time, I think we'll make it better than it is right now. If there are changes that we can make to make it better, then that's what we'll do.
I think that this council has wasted enough of the taxpayers' money, and you wanted to be on that committee, and it was decided that you wouldn't be. And I'm not even on that. The only thing that I have gotten paid for outside of the regular council payment that I get was the SRC, the one meeting that I went to there, and the UMNB conference, the one conference I went to there. And I believe I got mileage for going to the graduation at the Dalhousie High School to award the bursary, because it was more than 30 kilometers outside of our region. So maybe if you just review the policies, you'll know then what you get paid for and what you don't.
So let's move on. Councillor Carmichael.
Yes, I would want to do a community garden. I've reached out to one of our citizens in the village, and I never wasn't able to reach out. I'd like to have a community garden and start it, and I just want to know what the other councillors thought of it. I'm going to try again to reach this person, and then and I already discussed it with Daryl and our CAO. So we'll see what we can do. If not this year, we can maybe make it better next year. But I just wanted to get it started, just to be discussed and to see what the interest out there is for such a project, because it would be nice, I think, for people to get together now that the COVID is done, and with the price of food, it's always nice to be able to have a little bit of extra. That's just my point to bring that up. Thank you.
Okay, we just lost you a little bit there, but does anyone want to contribute to the discussion on a community garden?
I think it's a great idea. I know other communities have them. I'm not sure how they run them or put them together, but it might be something we might be able to reach out to other communities and municipalities to see how they run theirs. It would be a great incentive to have the youth work with older members of our community to put it together. There's a lot of education there between the two that could probably be a benefit to running a community garden. So I'm all for it, and we can get together and find out how other communities do it and take it from there.
There's a program called Communities in Bloom. I don't know if you've looked into that, but I know that I believe it's like a federal thing, or so you might want to look into that. And another suggestion, you may want to look into possibly maybe partnering with the school and having the garden there, because then the kids could tend to it, and you'd have the extra eyes onto it. Anyway, that's.
CEO Lee?
On to my points, Mr. Mayo. Real quickly, thank you very much to council for the opportunity. I plan to make the most of it. I know the expectation was to hit the ground running, and I think we've definitely done that. Getting right into my stuff. We've been approached by the Attapack Energy Group. My understanding is that they presented to council, everyone except for Councillor Courier. So I'm arranging for Raphael to do another session so that Christie can receive the same information that everyone else has. I'll keep everyone up to speed on that. I'm just waiting for a reply on Raphael, and then I'll reach out to Christie and we'll see what works. And if anyone wants to join that, if there's any questions that you had from the presentation earlier. I just wanted to make sure that council had this on the agenda because there are some pretty aggressive timelines that Raphael needs for the MOU. So in order to meet his time frame, there would need to be a motion on the agenda in April to do that. So if there is a directive to staff on that, if there's any information that you know that you require, please let us know so we can put that together. I will be reaching out to other communities. When we did meet, Raphael and I met in a very, I would suspect, condensed version of what he provided to council. And when we did have that discussion, he had not reached out to other municipalities to that point. So I would like to get a little bit of feedback from them on that, which I'll relay to council. But if there is a directive to staff to be issued here, then please let us know.
Any council wish to respond? Okay. Next.
Okay, we've been approached by AV Group concerning a traffic bylaw amendment for Turgeon Road. There is a traffic amendment in place from Turgeon Road, from Colony Road down to the bypass. They have approached previous councils for amendment, which was granted back in 2019. The duration of that bylaw amendment was for 36 months, so that has lapsed last October. They are looking to harvest more wood out of that area, so they would require an amendment again to be put in place, which they are requesting. With the previous council, they did come in and do a presentation, so I am requesting that they do the same thing with the sitting council. They did explain their maps and their routing and why they required that amendment. So that would be great information for council to have, whether we do that virtually or in person. I'll keep you updated. One of the little gripes that I did have in the last go around was just around road conditions. And I would like to see something that sort of holds the AV Group to making sure that the road conditions meet DTI standards. I have met briefly with the Planning Commission, with the Service Commission, and they did make the recommendation that if we have any conditions to add to the amendment, we simply do that as a condition in the motion. We don't necessarily need to change the amendment. You can leave it as is, but if there are conditions that you want tied to that, you just simply do that by means of motion. So that will likely also be on the agenda for the April council meeting.
If I may, Your Worship?
Yep.
How much of the AV Group contributed to the maintenance of that road?
I believe it was a responsibility of the AV Group. When they came in and met with council, they said they work very closely with DTI. They're aware of DTI's standards and road quality, requirements. So they would be maintaining the road themselves. They would be bringing in the machinery to do it, and so it was on them. It was not DTI that was involved in it.
All right.
Okay, my next item is the off-road vehicle bylaw. So this was a slight change, and I do believe that council's had conversations with Jacques Ouellette with Quad NB. And there was, it was noted kind of after the fact that there was some businesses in Beldoun that might not be benefiting, or they could potentially benefit from an extension of the permissible roads in the bylaw. So we took that information and we went back to Jacques Ouellette, and he did provide a revised municipal bylaw which included those areas. and businesses in the community. And he also provided a revised Schedule A to go along with that. So my expectation is that when this goes back to council, again, Jacques sort of explained the process from his perspective. His understanding was that it would go for, after first and second reading, prior to it going to a third reading. It would need to be vetted by either the province, I believe it was the Department of Justice and Public Safety. So it's not a huge rush for this.
Give me a minute, Landon. Councillor Robinson and Councillor Corrier are discussing something, so I don't know if they want to share that with council or maybe ask for a minute or two to talk about it. Oh,
We were just wondering about the overlap with the Skidoo Trail. Because Councillor Robinson had mentioned about, she thought it already took in the Quinn Road, but the problem is because the Skidoo, in the wintertime, the ATV trail is kept open. But in the wintertime, the Skidoo Club has the trail on the pipeline and on part of Lawler Road. So that's where the issue comes in. So in order for the ATV trail to be able to access the Quinn Road or some of the other, down this way, we would have to allow them and change that bylaw so that they too could use the main street, so they would be able to come down Jacket River Drive and use Main Street to get down as far as either the Quinn Road or even like the campground, like some of the businesses that are down here. So that's where the issue comes in. Otherwise, the ATV trail could have came down Mitchell Road and hooked the Lawler Road and hooked the pipeline. But because the Skidoo Club uses it, they can't. So unless they could come with an agreement to be able to both use that little section of the Lawler Road, because the Skidoo Club doesn't use the entire Lawler Road, it only uses a very short section of it, but they do use the entire pipeline. So if the Skidoo Club allowed the ATVs on that, it wouldn't be an issue, but as of right now, I don't believe they do, so that's why we would have to change the bylaw to allow the ATVs to travel on Main Street, which they would probably only be doing in the wintertime.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So would the revised bylaw then, Christie, cover that issue?
I believe it would, because then they would be able to, well, one thing that I did consider would be to contact the Skidoo Club to see, even if they didn't want to share the pipeline, which is a longer stretch of road, if they were able to stretch, or if they were able to share that very small section on the Lawler Road, well, then the ATV trail and the Skidoo Trail could both use that, and they could come right down Lawler Road and then down Main Street. If not, if the Skidoo Club won't let them do that, then they would have to come down Main Street, or sorry, Jacket River Drive and hook Main Street to come down. So that's the dilemma.
Okay, again, going back to the original issue, this doesn't impact Jacques' timelines. He understands that it's going to take, he needs to engage DTI, and it's going to take some time to do that. So all the information that we have on here, we can have this on the agenda for April. The third reading doesn't need to happen right away. We're likely going to wait on that anyway. I think we might have some time, so potentially we can investigate that. Maybe I'll connect with you and we'll get some details on that.
Perfect, sounds good, thanks.
Okay, so then the last point for me, I just have a few catch-all administrative updates. I just wanted to make sure that council was up to date on a couple of things that we're moving forward. So the joint establishment of the Joint Health and Safety Committee, touch base with WorkSafe. Timeline-wise, just so council has an expectation, we're really hoping to have this in place within the next 2 weeks. We're starting from the ground up. We did have a joint health and safety committee previous, but there's some great material with WorkSafe, so I think that we can kind of start from the ground up and rebuild it and have it done the way that we want it done. So we're looking to have that done. Hopefully, I do know that we're getting into some short weeks with Easter coming up, but my internal deadline was to try to have that in place for the end of next week. There has been a couple other things that have came up, so that might push out, but that's the target right now. So just for council's expectations, that's what we're looking at right now. We've also are moving forward with the EMO plan. So we reached out to Scott Poupard, who is our regional coordinator here in the area. Unfortunately, Scott's actually taking a bit of a leave right now, so he's stepping away. He's away for a month. So I didn't want to sit on this. I know that this is something that we want to push forward on. So we did have Ken McGee, who's was the former regional coordinator here, and I believe that he's up towards Restigouche right now. So he's volunteered to step in, which is good. He's also familiar with Beldoon and the plan that we had in place before. So we're actually meeting this Wednesday. We've got a meeting scheduled. He's also pulling over the regional coordinator from the peninsula, who, as I understand it, might be a little bit new to this, and this is going to be a good experience for them as well. So we've got that scheduled for Monday to kick off. I'll keep council updated as we progress through that. In speaking with Scott very briefly, with Scott Poupard, he did say it can, with our industry here, it could be a bit of a rigorous process. So he had actually suggested bringing in a third party to help consult through the process. I'm not opposed to it, but I would like to get an idea just internally if it's something that we could potentially manage on our own before we go that route. So we've got that rolling. Again, that's happening Wednesday this week, and then I'll be able to provide some updates after that meeting. We do have a public works laborer position that we're also moving forward with. I'm looking to set up interviews for that potentially late this week and into next week. I do want to have the interviews done for the end of next week. That's the target. Something that I was not necessarily aware of was how short public works is. And so I do think that I know that we're looking to fill one position right now. I do think that we potentially have the opportunity to fill more than one, only because one of the gentlemen that we do have working there is pulled from another department, and the expectation is that he is going to go back to that department when it opens back up. So rather than going through the entire process again, it might be a little bit more cost effective and more efficient to try to bring in 2 laborers. I'll keep council abreast on that as we process through it. But timeline wise, we do want to have those interviews done, and we'd like to have the evaluations put together for the end of next week. And then finally, the last one I have is the strategic plan. Unfortunately, right now, I'm not currently on the AMA&B networking group. We've got the requests out, so I do expect that'll happen the next couple of days. But I do have access to the CAO account, and there has been lots of information put over on different resources for strategic planning and different people that could potentially come in to do that. So already we do have a good list of candidates that I can move over to council, and council can determine how they'd like to engage somebody to help them through that process. Timeline wise, I just wanted to I think that in the next coming months, I know that it's going to be pretty extensive, but I would like to see this in place for like June or July of this year at the very latest, preferably June. So that's what we're kind of working with right now. We have also got a little bit of information from the Port of Beldoon on some of their strategic plans. I do think that it's when council is kind of building out their strategic plan, they should be cognizant of the industry. And if our plan can, potentially support theirs in some capacity, it would be good to have that information. So we have got some great material from the Port of Beldoon. I'll go through that, and I'll send that out to council so that everyone's aware of, the material that they've passed over. And it would be great actually to sync up with MB Power. That's another one that would be great to have their strategic plan for the next few years, and see if there's anything that council can do to align their strategic plan with theirs. So those are some catch-all things. We have a lot on the go right now, but if anyone has any questions on anything, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, CEO Lee. Appreciate that. Before we adjourn, I did have one question I wanted to ask a while ago and forgot, but I think it's important. I think the public would like to have this update. Councilor Burke, to your liaison committee report, which was appreciate that, was a good report. Was there any update in terms of the generating station itself and any of the alternatives that MB Power might be looking at?
Yeah, there are alternatives that they are looking at, but I don't know if I'd prefer to request that information from NB Power if they wish to have that public at this moment in time.
Okay, maybe we could do
yeah.
that. and-
What I have agreed to do is present my report to NB Power and to the port prior to making it public. So the report I read is the report that was approved by NB Power, so that's the approach that I will take. That's not because that there's any secrets there. It's because I just don't want to be in a position that we jeopardize some type of conversations or some type of business developments that may be discussed at either the port or at NB Power, and I don't want to be the rumor mill. So with that said, I will have the reports written, and I will have them approved, and those are the ones that I'm going to bring forward.
Thank you. Okay, well, with that, then we'll have a motion to adjourn.
I move that M 2022-04-03-79, that the meeting is adjourned at 8:09.
Need a seconder?
I'll second it.
On the question, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passed, meeting is adjourned. Yeah, out of, no, just 1 second.